I am, and here y'all are. Welcome to aka Rakxm's first ever review live stream. Thank you guys so much for joining me, if you are joining me. And I mean, it is what it is. It's a chance for y'all to get to see me in my element for the first time without having a way for me to upload to YouTube. And for those of you that are watching from YouTube, why aren't you following my Facebook page too? That's rude. It's just rude. So guys, a little bit of background as to why I'm doing Free Comic Book Day today. Some time ago, about a year ago, was when I started doing Free Comic Book Day review for the first time. It was the first Rakxm reviews video I ever did, and I decided to do it because, well, comics are my life, and Free Comic Book Day is a perfect opportunity to introduce newcomers to the idea of comic books. So what better way to start off Rakxm reviews than doing so? So that's what happened. So here we go. We have a stack of comics about yay high, and we're going to talk about each and every one of them. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So the first thing that I want to talk about, I'm going to let you guys know I'm going in a very particular order. I'm going to be talking about these in the order of basically how excited I am about each of these individual comics. Some I'm very excited for because they happen to be very great stories. Others, not so much. So I'm going in order from least excited to most excited. Now this first one is starting off, I just want to let you know, it's not because I'm not excited about it, it's not because I don't like the comic, it's because it's been out for a long time. And that is Spawn #1, done by Image Comics. Spawn is going to be hitting its 300th issue this August, and for those of you that don't really know a whole lot about comics, that's kind of a big deal. 300 is kind of like, if you can hit 300 comics, you're probably going to be just fine to keep going for a long time. Like, there's a few comics that have hit thousands recently. We've got, you know, Action Comics, we've got Detective Comics, Marvel is going to release a special 1000 issue later on this year, but 300 is kind of like, if you hit 300 comics, you're doing real well. And considering that it's an indie publisher that's hit 300 now, or that's about to hit 300, that's a huge deal. So congratulations to Todd McFarlane, who was the creator, not the creator of Family Guy. It's different from McFarlane, but I'm still, like, congratulations. And it's a very awesome, like, special cover. The original Spawn cover was very 90s. This one is very 90s, but more modern 90s. So it's awesome. And if you guys haven't read Spawn #1, it's dope, as is most of the Spawn series. I won't say most. I'll say the series is dope because, I mean, it is. There's death and destruction and fire and brimstone, literal fire and brimstone, as in hell. Next up, I am not a huge fan of the Riverdale series. I'm not. I have nothing against them trying to do something new with the series. Riverdale, I've heard really good things about it. I've heard not so great things about it, but me personally, I've never been a huge fan. It's nothing against the Archie comics. They're trying. The TV series is trying, and I mean, it's a pretty good cast from what I understand. It's just, I prefer the good old-fashioned Archie and Jughead kind of stuff, because it was silly, and I enjoy the silliness of it all. And this dark, gritty stuff, not really my jam, but that's fine. You know, some people enjoy it. I don't. But that's okay. Oh yeah, I guess I should tell you what this issue was about. It's the kickoff to Season 3 of Riverdale. I don't know what happened in Season 1 and or 2. I do figure that there's some death or something that happens because a lot of people are angry, and apparently Archie and Betty are no longer, or haven't really been like buddy friends in a while, but that's okay because they still love each other, and they pull a gift of the Magi type thing where they both sell something that's important to them to get something important for the other one, and it's kind of sweet, but also kind of been done before. Just my 2 cents, though. Alright, next up we've got Malika, Fire and Frost. Now, Malika is done by a comic publishing company called Unique. I know nothing about this comic book, and I will say that while the artwork and what the storyline sets up is actually pretty awesome, I have no idea what goes on before this story. Like, they lay out some good mythos of what happened thousands of years ago, but there's not really any explanation as to what's going on in the present day. And to me, that's kind of a big deal to know what's going on when you're reading something. And this, like I said, this just doesn't really lay it out for you. And unfortunately, because of that, it didn't really draw me in. It's probably for someone else out there, not really for me. But that's just my opinion. All right, next we have one. I got the first issue of this last year, and I wasn't thoroughly impressed. Like, there was some cool stuff in it, yes, don't get me wrong, but this one I just never really looked forward to, and it always does surprise me, and that is Starburns Presents. And you can see there's a number 2 up in the corner here, which it signifies that it is the second issue. This one has 6 issues, or 6 mini stories in it. The first is called Nasquatch, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is a Sasquatch that wants to be a NASCAR driver. And it is every bit as ridiculous as it sounds to start it off. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I can't even really put it into words how ridiculous it is, because it is too ridiculous. We then have a story called Helicious Pick Your Perdition. Helicious was something that showed up last year, and it was kind of I Hate Fairyland meets Hell. This one is different. It's a band that managed to summon a demon, and the demon's like, let's save some people, which is weird. We've got Invasion from Planet WrestleTopia, which is... They take all the things that are great about wrestling in the 1980s and 1990s and make a farce of it, and it turns out there's a whole planet of people claiming to be like wrestlers, and there's a universal champion who is pissed off to find out that there is a person from Earth claiming to be the universal champion. So they're going to invade the planet Earth and frickin' kill everyone. Then we've got B Squad, which is a parody of the A Squad, obviously, and it also includes elements from Gremlins, which is really weird. A Squad and Gremlins never really seemed like something to combine together, but they did it, and honestly, it cracked me up. Like, I was reading it, I was like, this is really funny. Like, they've got Mogwai that are, you know, the last of their kind because they killed all the other ones. It was a weird story, but it was a lot of fun. We've got a story called Griffin, the Galaxy's Most Wanted, which is... It was kind of a space cop story, also a space prison story. It wasn't really anything original. It wasn't like a cheap knockoff of something. It just wasn't anything like too gripping for me. Wasn't really my cup of tea. So there's that. And then Starburns Presents is always just like a little wrap up, like things that are coming out soon, which is, you know, always interesting in and of itself. So yeah, like I said, like this one isn't really the best thing I picked up from Free Comic Book Day, but it is still an enjoyable piece, and I am glad that I read it. I 5 pieces of work, 3 of which I really want to read more about. Next up, we have a comic that is based off of a cartoon from so long ago. For those of you that don't know who Little Lulu is this. I don't really know much about the character of Little Lulu. I will say, though, that this is a collection of comics. They are very cute, and they're very 1950s, like very, very much in the art style that they are. They're still done in that style, and it's printed on newsprint like comics of that day and age were, but they've got 3D glasses. They've got, you know, digging up worms on an island to help a boater, you know, keep his boat. Just nothing outrageously spectacular. It's very slice of life, very kid friendly, very fun, but not something that I'm going to go read more about. Just Marge's Little Lulu it's a family friendly, fun friendly kind of comic that unfortunately doesn't fall high on my list of things because I am a sick fuck and I like some gross stuff. That's just me though. Lucy and Andy Neanderthal, The Big and Bolder. This is very much in the style of Captain Underpants. It's actually very similar art style. It's done by a guy named Jeffrey Brown, so it's not Captain Underpants, so I can confirm that. But it's still a very enjoyable read. It takes place in the age of the Neanderthals and the first of the humanity. they find a meteor and they decide to mess with one of the kids and make him think that he can control people with his mind. It's fun. It's kind of a jab at kids and the games that they play with each other. But it's not, as with a lot of these, it's not my cup of tea, but I will say the art style is great. I do very much enjoy the art style, and I don't know, like I genuinely hope that this finds some kind of traction and, you know, becomes a thing, because the art style, as I said, is beautiful. The story, while it's not really my thing, is still very well done. It's very much feels like a Captain America or Captain Underpants story that took place in the, you know, the Stone Age. Next up, this is one that confuses me more than anything. Cristiano Ronaldo's Striker Force 7. I don't understand what it is about athletes and movie stars that think that they need to shoehorn themselves into the comic book world. I don't get that. I know Eminem did that with The Punisher. I know that they did that with Muhammad Ali and Superman way back in the day. I've never really been a fan of that sort of thing. But setting aside the fact that Cristiano Ronaldo's came out with a comic book about himself, and no offense to you, Mr. Ronaldo, it's not that it's a bad thing. It's not really something that I personally enjoy. Now, that being said, take away the element of the real life person making a comic book about themselves and whatnot, and it was actually a pretty cool story. The story is about Cristiano Ronaldo becoming a superhero because the world needs his particular set of skills. They never really explain what it is, but throughout the story he does end up learning how to absorb the abilities of other superhumans, which is cool. It's a cool idea. It's very much an Avengers building the Avengers kind of story. And again, if it weren't for that small aspect of the real life athlete writing a comic book about himself, this would be great. And I mean, I can look past it. Like, if I didn't know who Cristiano Ronaldo was, and if they didn't make such a big deal about the back, like, hey, this is a real person writing a comic book about himself, I probably wouldn't have never known the difference. So that's it. That's all I got on Cristiano Ronaldo's Striker Force 7. Okay, the Overstreet Guide to Collecting is something that is released, a little bit of it is released every Free Comic Book Day. And it's cool. The Overstreet Guide to Collecting is a great tool that helps you understand what comic book prices and values are, which is great. Most people don't really think about it, and if you don't know where to look, you don't know where to look. The Guide to Collecting is great because you can see, like, this is what this is valued at, roughly. Now, what this thing is in addition to introducing you to the idea of Free Comic Book Day, as well as what the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide is, it tries to be silly and writes a comic about a comic book fan going in looking for comics, and then it tells you a little bit more about what Free Comic Book Day is. It has a little homage to Stan Lee, which is great. I love Stan Lee homages. He deserves it. He did a lot for the comic book community. And then it has a guy come in that looks a hell of a lot like Rick Grimes that tries to rob the comic book store on Free Comic Book Day. So these two stories are very campy, very they felt very forced, in my opinion. But let's be real here. It's a comic that was written to explain what Free Comic Book Day is to the non-comic book reader. It makes sense why they had to make it silly, they had to make it campy, they had to make it eye-catching. And they did a good job of that for the casual reader. So props to them, and also props on the Stan Lee, homage, which was a good thing to have. A series that I've been wanting to get into myself, both in the animated series and the comic books, is Robotech. Now, this is a zero issue for an upcoming event called Event Horizon. I don't know anything about Robotech. As far as I can tell, it looks a lot like Voltron or Transformers. But the thing is, this issue doesn't introduce what it is. You meet characters that have already completed events, or that have already completed tasks. that have been out and about doing things for a while now. And it doesn't really do anything to lead into what comes next, or I'm sorry, it doesn't really explain anything as to what came first. It only talks about what's coming next. And for me, that's kind of a frustration because I don't know what happened. I don't know who these people are, and I don't know what is going on in this thing. And I also didn't realize that my sign back there says, eat ass, get money. So that's a thing. Anyway, so Robotech, like, the artwork is gorgeous. I love the artwork. I love the colors and everything. It's really good. It sets a really gritty tone. It's just, I would have liked to know a little bit more about what was going on beforehand. But I guess I'd have to go out and buy that to find out. Next is Defend Comics. Defend Comics is another compilation series. It's got 4 small stories. Pailu of the Woods, which I actually have seen in stores now, which is great. It's an Oni comic, or I'm sorry, an Oni Press comic that is about a little person. I honestly can't tell the gender of the child in this story, that finds a wood spirit and helps her to get home to where she belongs, who has run away from home. And it's very sweet. It's a very artistically pleasing story, and I really am looking forward to reading more about it. It's one of those that, like, as soon as I was reading it, it caught my eye, it hooked me and pulled me in to learn more about it. The next one is called Apocalypse Taco, and Apocalypse Taco it just makes me, it's an uncomfortable read. It's about a group of high schoolers whose world is melting around them, and not like things are melting. It's like everything is melting, and it looks like Clayface when he's changing. And I mean, there's obvious reasons. It's body snatchers type situation. The teenagers are just trying to survive, but everything's melting around them. It's very uncomfortable, like coming to life, melting, just not a good time. And artistically, it's great. Like I said, it's beautiful artwork. It just makes me very uncomfortable to look at. Just because of the fact that it's like melting, invasion, the body snatchers type stuff. We've got one called Nobody's Fool, which is about a man going to a freak show, and it's done in a style that it's hand drawn, like it's pencil, or it's ink on paper, and it's done with no color, just hatching and line. Now, this art style for me works great for like newsprint, things like that. As far as comics go, I'm not a huge fan of seeing that in a full-length comic series, but for each his own. Like, if you enjoy that sort of thing, great. Enjoy it, love it, do it, be it. We've got a story in here called A Fire Story. It's literally just a family wakes up because a woman smells smoke, and they leave. That's it. We don't see anything beyond that. We just know that they pack up and they leave. So it sets up what's probably going to happen next is there's a fire or something of that nature. I don't know enough about it. It doesn't give any more insight other than what is taken with them. The last story is very obviously a ripoff of Charlie Brown. It's a story called Bags or a Story Thereof. And the artistic style is like a grittier Peanuts. There's even like Snoopy's Doghouse. But the story is basically a man finds out his dog is missing and assumes that everybody is in on a conspiracy that his dog was stolen from him because that's all he loves in life. It's weird. Just straight up, it is a weird story. I am not sure what I was supposed to get out of it. I do know that he is still out there looking for it as of the end of Free Comic Book Day, but I hope he finds it and gets to go home because he deserves it. Charlie Brown, after 87 years of being prepubescently bald, like, he deserves to find his dog and bring her back. And yes, it's a her. The dog's name is Beth. Next up is a Finding Nemo is a knockoff of Finding Nemo. It's called Go Fish. What it is it's a story about a little fish that moves to the big city to get a job. Now the thing is in this city, the jobs that are available to fish are only the things that actually apply to the skill set that those individual fish have. The fish that goes is a parrotfish. And he's told that they don't need any more parrotfish, so then he's stuck to figure out where to go from there. Yeah, I'm not going to read any further into this story. It's just, honestly, it holds no interest for me, and Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Knockoff of a knockoff of Finding Nemo. Next up, we have Funny Pages from the Treasury of British Comics. Now, this comic is just a bunch of single-page, maybe two-page comic stories from the British Treasury of Comics. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just, they're all so off-putting to look at, in my opinion. And there's a lot of things that are jokes that only make sense if you understand the context they're coming from. We're Americans at least I'm an American, and a lot of us over here that are watching would be American, and we don't understand all of the niceties of British humor. We only understand the jokes that we know, and that's fine. And if you enjoy the British humor, pick this up. I mean, what do you have to lose? You know, it's like 13 different stories all packed into one issue. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 issues. And like, there's a Frankenstein story, there's a story about a shark, there's a story about a witch, there's a story about a vampire. There's a lot going on. So it's you know, got a little bit of everything. It's just a lot of British humor that is kind of dry and not my thing. It's just not. Next up is Ghost Hog. It's another one of those stories that is very much targeted towards kids, which is fine. It's about a ghost hog. It's a little pig that dies. And in her first part of the story, she ends up saving a friend from a spirit of an angry deer who died because her apple was taken, and his apple was taken, and he starved to death. So the spirit hog is like, well, why don't you just eat another apple? And the deer's response is, it's not my apple. I don't want that apple. I want the apple that I wanted. And it's a really good satire of how a lot of people's thinking is in America. A lot of people, it's not good enough. What you're being given is not good enough, and you need more. So, I don't know. I think it's really crazy that was in a children's comic, but the fact that it is something there is pretty good. And then we have a second story where the ghost hog takes on a river lion. And that is as far as it goes. You see a river lion and they set you up to come back next time. And that is very awesome because it gives you a reason to come back. Alright, another one that I have no issues with whatsoever. The artwork is stylistically beautiful. Everything about it was beautiful, except if you don't know what it's about, you don't know what it's about. And that is Bloodshot. The Bloodshot stories, and for the most part, the Valiant comics that come out on Free Comic Book Day tend to set up events that are coming out. And with that, the issue comes is I haven't read any of the Valiant comics. I know of the character Bloodshot. I know that he started back in the late 80s, early 90s. I know that they're doing a web series starring Jason David Frank as Bloodshot, but that's all I know about him. And this story is apparently setting up some kind of big event in his narrative. I just don't know what happened before. I only know what's happening now and what might happen later. So it's kind of hard to enjoy when you don't really have any history with the character. The other half of this comic is called Fallen World. Fallen World is about the world falling. That's about as plain and simple as I can say it. We've got the year 4001. What is assumed to be heaven falls from the sky. Turns out it's just it's like a satellite community where a lot of the Valiant stories take place, I'm assuming, in 4001. And we have a zealot, or a religious leader, that believes it's heaven, and when one of his other proteges is saying, this can't be heaven, there's no way this is heaven, he kills him and says, as it's God's will, and you have failed God, you must die. It's dark shit, guys. It's dark. It's real dark. But it is what it is. Next up, we have another one of those weird, I know of it, I don't know a lot of it though, kind of things, and that is Captain Canuck. Captain Canuck is basically the American or the Canadian version of Captain America, literally to a T. And this really just sets up the next big story that's going to be happening in the Captain Canuck Chapter House universe. What I know is that there's a new Captain Canuck God, I hate saying that name. I really do. But there's a new Captain Canuck, and he's got to save the world with the help of his sidekick, who is French, because British Columbia or Victoria, or whichever part of Canada speaks French. And yeah, it just kind of reintroduces the ideas through what is basically a affidavit. Is that the right word? I don't think that's the right word. A folder full of information about Captain Canuck's history, which is cool. Like, it gives you kind of a quick history on things that have happened recently, but not enough to really like know the full history of Captain Canuck, which means that I have to either go read it or just go forward with it. And either way, I don't know. I'm kind of torn. I kind of want to read all of them, but at the same time, I don't really. But it is what it is. Next up, we have one from Epicenter Comics called Zagor, the Alien Wars. I don't know who Zagor is. He kind of reminds me of like a Conan the Barbarian from the cover. Turns out that Zagor, the character of Zagor, is roughly the Wild West era. He's like a gun for hire kind of guy, like Jonah Hex kind of character. But he wears these sleeveless shirts, which makes sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. And him and his sidekick end up getting found by aliens and abducted by aliens, like straight up abducted by aliens. And they find out that one of their old enemies is working in cahoots with the aliens and was working towards bringing about the end of humanity for revenge against Zagor, which seems a little extreme, but also makes it's kind of cool. Oh, and the art style of said Zagor the Alien Saga comic is done in that very much that pulpy 1940s like comic book style, like The Shadow, things like that. So it's really fun, and it's a good callback to that time period. A Sheet's Story is a comic I didn't want to like. I didn't. The main character is a girl. I'm guessing that there's been a recent death of their mother. And the girl is kind of pushing away from her family. Her brother is like very excited to be part of it. They're going to visit grandma. And the little girl is just kind of being a butthead to her grandma. I think she's a 12-year-old, maybe 13-year-old. And, you know, at 12 or 13, all kids start to push away from their family a little bit. And then you find out about halfway through this issue that the little girl has a best friend that's a ghost. And wears a sheet. Like, this ghost on the cover is an actual ghost, not just like a funny thing. So we get to see that this girl is, you know, she's sad, as one would be if you lost your mother, and then she kind of opens up more to her grandmother, and the sheet boy helps her with that, which is nice. It's good. It took me a few pages to get into it. It was definitely more of a slow start, like when you're watching The Office. That first season is hard to get through, but once you get past it, you know, it's a little more enjoyable. Next up is a dual comic done by Dark Horse. Dark Horse did Minecraft and The Incredibles 2. Not in the same story, we'll say that. In the Minecraft story, we have a young girl who is what's known as a griefer. They burn things down just for the hell of it, to be an asshole. And she ends up meeting this faceless character. Of all the characters they could have chosen, they went with a faceless, weird-looking character rather than just using like Herobrine, which is a character that's already like a creepy character introducing the thing. Anyway, this faceless character says, any damage that you do in this world will affect your world. And she's like, whatever. And then the house next door to hers burns down. So that's fucking weird. I didn't like that. And then we get to The Incredibles 2, where Bob and his wife, God, what's her name? What is her name? Oh my God, I'm bad. Bob and Helen. I knew it was a 4-letter name. I was thinking Linda. Bob and Helen need a date night. They really do. So the kids decide to give them a date night. They say, we'll watch Jack Jack. And then the parents go off to the movies, and the most boring villain ever shows up and is like, I'm gonna stop things. And he uses math, and paper clips. I don't mean boring as in he wasn't well done. I mean boring as in he's a boring person and needs to be stopped. So the Incredibles beat him up, as the Incredibles do. So it was fun. It really was. It was a fun story. It had beautiful artwork. The artwork is beautifully crafted, and we got to see the family fight together again, which was fun, because that's what happened in The Incredibles 2, and that was fun. Next up, we have a story called Deadly Class. They've got a TV show now or something, and they've been going for a while. It's Deadly Class Killer Set. I know nothing about this series. I do love their insignia on the back. From what I can pick up, this is a school for assassins, and assassin they do. There is a group of kids that are like, we're teenagers, we shouldn't be doing this kind of shit. We should be enjoying ourselves. So they go to a concert, and they invite the angry Russian kid, and the angry Russian kid's like, no, fuck you. And then he's like, oh wait, my parents' killers are there. I'm gonna go with you. That wasn't Russian. That was a terrible Russian impersonation, but you get the idea. So he goes with them, and he kills people. He kills like 4 people. And meanwhile, everyone else is downstairs jamming out, getting high, and having a good time. So I don't know what to think of it. Like I'm more or less indifferent about it. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It was a comic I read on Free Comic Book Day, which was pretty cool. It was a really cool read. I'm probably not going to look further into Deadly Class, but I gave it a try. I gave it that old college try, y'all, and that's all that matters, right? We're back to the kids-friendly stuff with Casper's Spooksville. Now, I don't hate Casper. I don't love Casper. I enjoyed the 1990s movie of Casper, and I did not enjoy the sequels or subsequent other stuff that happened with Casper's stuff. This comic, I did kind of enjoy. It's got a couple of different stories. The first one is called Blow Off Some Scream. Casper's friend Spooky and his girlfriend Pearl broke up. And Casper decides to take them each individually and kind of like help them reconcile everything. They go out, they scare some people, which Casper hates doing, and they both realize like, oh my gosh, I miss my girl, I miss my boy, let's go back and we'll be together. And then they scare each other by accident, and they fiddle off. And I'm assuming later they get back together because, when you're dead, you've got nothing better to do. We then have the big switcheroo, which is Casper and Wendy and a demon baby named Hot Stuff. I don't know how I feel about a demon baby in a diaper named Hot Stuff, but it is what it is. They end up switching bodies by accident and kind of teaching their respective bullies a lesson on just being nicer to people, which is cool. And then they switch bodies back, as one does at the end of a body swapping story, except in some hentais. And then the final story is actually a reprinted story from way back in the day called The Man from Mars, which is Casper helps a lonely squirrel beaver creature thing go for a ride in a fake rocket ship. Oh, it's a rabbit. It's a rabbit, not a bunny beaver. And kind of just shows him around town. And the bunny rabbit thinks that he's actually going to Mars. And because kids are stupid. I mean, that is what it is. Doctor Who, the 13th Doctor. Now, I know there's been some controversy about having a female doctor. I think it's long overdue. The only time that we've had a female doctor was in a joke video that was starring Rowan Atkinson as he, regenerated like 16 times in a row. So the fact that we finally have a female doctor, and she kind of dresses a hell of a lot like one of the previous doctors, is great. And from the comic, from what I can tell, she seems like she's a very fun personality, like some of the previous doctors had. They go to this carnival in space, as one does when you're with the Doctor. And during this carnival in space, one of them ends up getting abducted, because that's what happens when you lose a game in an alien carnival. They keep you as a prize for someone later on down the road. So the Doctor has to win them back, and luckily they do, and they all go off gallivanting into the sunset, because that's what happens when you're with the Doctor. Most of the time you don't die. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you get sent back to like the 1920s and die right before they find you. So, yeah, fun stuff, guys. One of the most odd cash grabs I've ever seen Disney do is a series called Descendants. Now, this version is done by Tokyo Pop. It's the manga of it, and this is a character named Dizzy. Dizzy Tremaine, which means that she is the descendant of Lady Tremaine, Madame Tremaine, whichever Tremaine it is, the wicked stepmother from Cinderella. And according to this, Dizzy spent a lot of time working with her grandmother to, like, do things. Like, she works in a sewing shop with her grandmother. And if her grandmother is indeed Madame Tremaine, that makes no sense as to why she is a nice girl. Because most of the time, if you're raised by assholes, and your mother was raised by an asshole, you become an asshole. It's just, it's Freud, man, or something, psychology. I didn't go to college. I'm going to college presently. She also meets up with Dr. Fossilier, the bad guy from Princess and the Frog, and what I'm assuming is Captain Hook's kid. And yeah, I mean, it's a thing. It is what it is. Like, I'm not going to read it. I'm never going to read Descendants. I'm never going to watch the films or the TV series that came from this whole thing. But, you know, some people out there enjoy it. I personally don't. But that's fine. Free Comic Book Day is introducing you to new things. And I tried new things. Speaking of kid-friendly things that are new to me, Wolfie Monster and the Big Bad Pizza Battle. So, in a nutshell, this story is about a family-run pizza restaurant that is run by the worst staff ever. The family of the owners. And as we all know, that's not always a great thing. They end up getting, well, into a court, basically some big bad company wants to come and buy them. And they're like, no, we're going to stand our ground. Now, again, worst workers ever running this place. And they plan to stand up to a corporation that wants to buy them. We know that's not going to work out for them. But good for them for trying. Man, we're on a roll with these kids-friendly comics. Next up is Gilbert. Gilbert is this guy right here. Little creature from the Black Lagoon looking motherfucker, who is waking up to take his sister Pearl, I think. Pearl makes sense, I think. Yada yada yada. What's its name? Yeah, it's Pearl. There's a lot of pearls that are introduced this year. So he has to take his sister Pearl out with him as they go out for Everything Day. Everything Day means that you do everything. That's it. That's the whole day. But you've got to start Everything Day off by talking to, what's its name? What is its name? Wait, Matilda's the sister. They're going to see the Pearl. Yeah, something like that. So they're going to see the Pearl to figure out what they're supposed to do on Everything Day. It's a silly little story. The artwork's done by Art Baltazar, who does like that childish. He did the Teen Titans Go comics or something, I think. The Little Gotham, stuff like that. It was cool. The other story that's in this comic is from a series called Monica Adventures. Monica Adventures is a Hispanic comic. It looks like it takes a lot of inspiration from different animes as well as RG comics. And it doesn't really do a whole lot other than introduce the reader to Monica and kind of set like, hey, this is coming in the future, read it. So, I don't know. That one was, that particular issue was kind of a fun read, but for the most part it was just something to fill my empty day with reading. So, yeah. We move away from the kid-friendly stuff into Vampirella. Now, for those of you who don't know, Vampirella is the opposite of kid-friendly. I mean, I'm sure as you can tell from her outfit. In this particular issue, Vampirella has two stories. The first story is a young protege of hers, someone that was turned into a vampire by her, is desperately trying to get some FaceTime with Vampy. And she doesn't want it. She's just, get away from me, go live your own life. And the teenage girl's not having it. She's like, I'm going to hang out with you, I'm going to be just like you. And Vampy's just done. She's just done with it. And that kind of is it for that story. And then we're taken to a story where she is trying to save a race of bug people from getting killed by the human people that live in a wild western community, because they think the bug people are abducting people to eat them, when in reality they're abducting people to wipe their memories and then send them back to the village. It's not the bug people's fault that they don't remember 3 days at a time. Unfortunately, Vampy fails, and the bug people and the human people cross paths. They hurt each other, they kill each other, the queen of the bug people dies, and Vampy is hated by both parties. So, lesson here, don't ever help anyone, kids. Never help a single soul. You can tell them Rakxm told you that. Next up is Witch Hat Atelier. I hope I said that right. Atelier. Yeah, that sounds right. Atelier. So, this comic introduces us to magic. If you've never seen magic before, this would be your introduction to magic. It starts off with a little girl. I'm assuming that's a girl. I can't honestly. It's hard to tell sometimes with manga and anime. But yeah, it looks like a girl who accidentally turns her home into stone, as well as her family, which sucks. But I mean, you know, Harry Potter's parents died, and he turned out fine, I guess. This story also includes a snippet from what's called Magus of the Library. And Magus of the Library is about a young prince who wants to go and explore the world, until he's pulled back by his butler, and it's revealed that there was just a book being read by a librarian person, and it was all a lie. And apparently the books that he reads brings him into the real worlds, which is weird. And then we get a sneak preview at, if you've never read Cardcaptor Sakura, it's like your first look into it. And it's cool because it's Cardcaptor Sakura, which I always thought was like a Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh type situation. Turns out it's more of like saving the whole world by collecting the cards that belong in this book. So I didn't know that. I learned something. And that's it for this issue, guys. Midnight Sky, which is a story about like mutants in the future that can only be revealed with certain colored lights. And it's basically just a struggle to survive, like as most future things are. It's you gotta survive or you'll die. And in addition to the Midnight Sky story, there's also a story called Long Live Pro Wrestling, which there's an announcer for a wrestling company that gets fed up with all the bullshit fake stories that come with the wrestling. He wants to get back to the good old days where people just beat the hell out of each other without all of the scripts and all of the, you know, I am the Rock and you're not the Rock and the Rock hates the not the Rock kind of stuff. It was dumb, in my opinion. Like, I get it. I get that some people want to go back to the classics, but, you know, it works for the people that watch pro wrestling and enjoy it the way that most people do. And then the other one is a character named Gut Ghost. Gut Ghost absorbs a guy like years ago, forgets about him, and as he's digesting and dying in the Gut Ghost, he becomes angry and decides to break himself out and declares vengeance on the Gut Ghost. It's absolutely horrifying. And I don't know why I want to read the rest of it, but I do. I gotta know what happens next. Oh, I'm gonna hesitantly say we hit the halfway point, guys. We're about halfway done. This book, or this stack of books, looks considerably smaller than what I pulled out initially. So next up, we've got a Boom Studios #1 for Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Firefly. Now the Firefly story, I have no idea what it has to do with Firefly other than the fact that it's called Firefly. The Buffy the Vampire Slayer story was done, the artwork at least, was done by Mora. Now Mora is one of my favorite artists because he does the artwork for Go-Go Power Rangers. And if you guys have watched anything on my channel, you know that I'm a Power Rangers fan. And I was reading the comic, or the issue, and the artwork here is Dan Mora. Like, it's straight up, I thought I was reading a Power Rangers story at first until I was like, wait, this is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So the fact that I get to see one of my favorite artists doing, you know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer makes me want to read Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I'm probably going to read Buffy the Vampire Slayer now. So well done, Boom Studios, for putting somebody in a position that they should be in. Kino's Journey is a comic by Vertical Comics. Now, I picked this up the first time, and I looked at it and I was like, that is a beautiful girl. I realized later that it's a man, or at least a young boy. So Kino is on a journey across the world. He doesn't know where he's going. He just has a talking bike with him. Kind of like Wonder Wheels, I think. I never watched Wonder Wheels. I don't know if that's true or not. So he's making a journey across the world, and he comes to some train tracks and decides to follow them. And as he's going, he runs into an old man that is polishing the train tracks. He's been at it for 50 years to send money home to his wife and kids. He doesn't know what's going on at home. He just knows that he's been doing it for 50 years. And so they leave him, and they keep going. And then they come across a man who's tearing up the train tracks. He's been doing it for 50 years to send money home to his wife and kids. He doesn't know why he's doing it, but he just keeps on doing it. And they keep going, and they meet a man who is laying down fresh tracks, because luckily for him, there is fresh tracks laying all along where he's supposed to be laying the tracks down. He's been doing this for 50 years to send money home to his wife and kids. He doesn't know why he's in charge of doing it, but he does it anyway. And then they get to a place where they take a break, and the bike asks Kino where they're going, why they're going the direction that they're going. And Kino's response is he doesn't know where he's going. He just knows he'll know when he gets there. And I'm confused as to what the message to this is supposed to be. Like, are we supposed to just do things without thinking about them? Or are we supposed to just act and then think later? I don't know. It's just, what are your thoughts on that, guys? Please, let me know. And we'll go discuss that later. It seems to me that every free comic book day, I've seen a Street Fighter comic book. And this year was no different. Street Fighter Karen versus Sakura. Sakura versus Karen. So Sakura is a character from Street Fighter that's been around for a long time. Actually, this is some artwork from the earlier years. She's got that traditional schoolgirl outfit, which is, it is what it is. And Karen is always been perceived as her opponent, I suppose. And this is kind of where they come and fight each other for like one last time before they realize they can be friends. And that's what's important in life, is the friends you make along the way. It doesn't matter how bad of a person you've been to someone, you can always befriend them later. And that feels very Goku. That feels very much like what the Z Warriors do. I don't know a whole lot about Street Fighter. I've played a few of the games, but I mean, this was a fun story. Like, it was enjoyable. I thoroughly had fun reading it. And as a standalone, it worked really well. Like, it introduced us to two characters, gave us a quick synopsis of who they were, and then moved past it. Like, that was it. You didn't need to know a whole bunch of backstory. You just needed to know who they were in the instant. So, there's that. Dear Justice League is one of the Disney Zoom previews. So from my understanding, DC Zoom is brand new, but it's also ending soon, and they're going to just make it DC Kids along with the DC Ink line. Dear Justice League is kind of what, how to word it? It's like kids are able to text and email the Justice League, and the Justice League will respond to them, and it's really cute. There's a kid who asks Superman, like, do you ever make mistakes? And then it shows Superman make a huge mistake. He's texting while flying. He bumps a building. On the other side of the building, there is a window washer who one of the cords snaps. He falls. He drops something. That hits someone. Something else bad happens. It's just a line of things that are all caused by Superman texting and flying. And then he gets a ticket, which is wonderful. And then we have a girl that messages Hawk Girl and is, you know, oh yeah, hold up. Sometimes I gotta go back and, this is part of it, guys. This is all part of the behind the scenes stuff that you don't get to see normally. Hawk Girl gets a message asking, like, if she, as a hawk, eats small woodland creatures. And her response to that is, no, I don't. I feed small woodland creatures. And then she feeds her guinea pig, and it's really cute and it's sweet. Which is great. I love it. I actually very much enjoyed that. I'm not a huge Superman fan, and I don't really know enough about Hawk Girl, but seeing them both doing these very small things to help the kids was beautiful. I very much enjoyed it, and I'm probably going to pick up a copy of that at some point. Next up, we get back to the adult-only kind of stuff. Grumble versus the Goon. I don't know who Grumble is. I only know the Goon from one comic, and that was the Goon versus Death Clock. And that was years back, like almost like 8 years ago now that I read that. Basically what happens is Grumble, this, I don't even think that's his actual name, this little pug-looking bastard ends up finding a piece of equipment that sends him to a different dimension where he meets the Goon. and they get into a fight, and then they realize they have a common enemy. They fight together and save each other's lives. It's a very common thing in superhero and comic books in general that, there's a misunderstanding. They fight, they stop fighting, they go their separate ways. It worked really well. You have a pug. Everyone loves pugs. And a big burly man. Everyone loves big burly men carrying around wrenches. So it worked well. It was fun. And, I'm kind of curious as to read more about both of these characters now. So, well done to Albatross Books. Yeah, Albatross. A company I don't really read a whole lot of. So, you guys got me now. Lumberjanes, The Shape of Friendship. This is basically if Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts weren't totally focused on badge collecting. These girls end up saving the world from supernatural threats quite often, and they have their leader who's kind of just done with it all. She's like, girls, I just want one peaceful week, but they don't get that because they're in a woods that is haunted. And I gotta be honest, I've never actually picked up Lumberjanes before. But after reading this, I very much enjoyed it, and I kind of want to read more about it and learn more about it because of how intriguing of a story it was. And the artwork is beautiful. This is one of the stories, just very simple, easy to read, understandable artwork. And then another one of the stories has this more watercolor artwork, and I love watercolor. I love doing artwork, so it's cool to see different styles of artwork in the stories. So, yeah. Next up is Bob's Burgers. Bob's Burgers is one of my favorite cartoons right now. The wife and I have watched this a few times over, and it's a good show. It's wholesome for the most part. It's wholesome. It's a family show. You see family together. Bob's Burgers comics tend to focus on the kids. The first comic we have is called Louise's Unsolved Mysteries, Curious Curiosities presents The Ride, Part 1 and 2. In this comic, they find out that one of the rides at Wonder Wharf manages to stop time for a brief period of time. And, well, obviously they're going to go and use that to stop time, win a bunch of tickets, and win prizes at the booth, because that's somehow how it works. And when they do that, they realize, oh god, now we have to get back onto the ride while it's moving so that we can go back to the present time. Because you don't want to be stuck in tandem time forever, do you? I wouldn't. Actually, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I could get so much done. Oh, so much done. Anyway, the next story is called The Genus Touch. Basically, Gene wishes that everything he touches would turn into cheese. Just like King Midas wished everything would turn to gold. And there was a book years ago called The Chocolate Touch, all three of which involve turning everything you love into cheese, or chocolate, or gold, and then wishing that you hadn't done that. Because why would you want to turn your family into cheese? I don't know. And then the last story in this involves Tina. She is a starship commander fighting an army of robots, until she realizes that the robots have excellent rhythm, and decides to dance with the Jimmy Jr. looking fucking robot and ending the war forever because they dance. Because why not, Tina? Why not? Your erotic friend fiction never makes sense. Ugh. Next up we have My Hero Academia. I talked about My Hero Academia last year when they did a free comic book day issue. I said I was hooked on the idea, so I gave it a chance. I watched the first and second seasons of My Hero Academia, loved it, and then forgot to watch the rest of it. So, I guess you could say I'm kind of an expert now. Yeah. But this is actually a part of the story I haven't seen or read yet, and it's really cool to get that little preview as to what's coming. The other story in it is called The Promised Neverland. The Promised Neverland I'm going to talk about actually more in depth than I did with My Hero Academia, because it's cooler, in my opinion, right now. So The Promised Neverland is about a girl who is in an orphanage-style home with dozens of other kids. She says that she's the oldest member of the family that lives here at this orphanage. And while she's there, it's revealed that each child has a barcode on its neck as well as a number printed underneath it. And they are able to go outside, they go play, have fun outside, this, that, and the other. They're just told never to go past a certain point. And then the main character comes to that certain point and stops. And it's kind of revealed that like nobody ever really questions why. They always just stop there. So my guess is that for the future, this young woman is going to go past the boundary. And stuff are going to happen because like it's promised Neverland. So like that just kind of has a feel of like something has to happen, some fantastical thing. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to see what happens. Okay. An aftershock story I've been wanting to read for a long time is Animosity. Animosity, so far that I know of, has had 2 titles, Animosity and World of Animosity. Add that now, Animosity Tales. The first story focuses on a betta fish who realizes and professes his love for his owner. And she takes the betta fish as well as like a whole bunch of pets a whole bunch of fish to a river and a lake to survive. And upon arriving, they meet a crocodile who is like, I'm gonna kill y'all. And then they help the crocodile, and the crocodile then understands like they're here to help. So he defends them, they defend him. And they become like a little family in the woods, which is really sweet. I very much enjoy the way this story goes. Like, as a whole, Animosity is a pretty dope story from what I have read and seen. For those of you who don't know what Animosity is, one day, animals all around the world become conscious. Like, at once. Everyone's like, oh, I can think now. And some of them, much like humanity, decides to trash everything. Others decide to work with humanity to try and make a better future. And it's really important that we realize that, like, yes, animals are things too that have emotions and feelings. Because on the off chance that all of animals wake up in at one time in the future, which side do you want to be on? So yeah, dark and spooky. Next up, we have The Tick. The Tick is another one that's been doing a lot of new stories on Free Comic Book Day, as well as Halloween Comic Fest. In this story, there's 2 stories. One that follows immediately after last year's Free Comic Book Day, where he's at a wedding, misses the wedding, and then he finds like himself being abducted by his biggest fans. They have everything from the Tick collection except for the Tick himself. So they get abducted. Then there's a follow-up story to that where the Tick loses his memory for a while and comes across a bunch of coyotes and just assumes that he's a coyote after that. It's a weird story, for sure, but it fits very much in with the Tick. It's the Tick, he does weird shit. Let's just go with it, right? Alright, another one that I had a hard time wanting to like. This is one that I took one look at the cover and I was like, there is no way in hell this is going to be an enjoyable story. I was very wrong. My favorite thing is monsters. As you can see, this is all done in ballpoint pen. I saw that and I thought to myself, there's no way in hell I'm going to enjoy this. I was very wrong. Like, there is a lot of heart written into this issue. It gives a backstory on the artist that did this work, that she's been fighting her whole life, and for a while she lost her ability to write, and she forced herself to relearn how to write and use her right hand to do stuff. And now she's got a book that came out called My Favorite Thing is Monsters. And the first book came out in 2017, and if I remember right, there's another one coming out soon. And like I said, the entire thing is done in ballpoint pen. It's a different art style. Like, most people would never think of doing that, but it works. It works really well. Stranger Things Season 1 and 2 have come and gone, and now we're moving on to Season 3. But the comics are sticking between seasons 1 and 2, where Will was in the Upside Down. He's traumatized. He's dealing with that trauma, and his friends are trying to be there for him. And it's hard to do because of the things that they can't quite comprehend him going through. Next up, we've got Blastosaurus, another one of those indie comics that is just ridiculously well done. He's a dinosaur that's also a detective. This issue actually has an ongoing story called, oh god, basically it's a party celebrating Blastosaurus. There are several smaller stories in it. One is the Crurorian Caper, I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. A bunch of redneck vampires show up and want to steal all the blood in a blood bank. Blastosaurus shows up and kicks some ass. Next up we find the... Next up is a story called Skid Marks in the Sky. There's a guy that's releasing basically farts into the city, and it's knocking people out all over the place. We have one where it's called To Be or Not Tuber. A potato takes over the body of a guy and does bad things. Blastosaurus shows up, realizes it's a potato, puts the potato down the garbage disposal, which pulls all of its tendrils out of the guy. And it's weird. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the Blastosaurus story is weird. It ends with him fighting a giant lobster at the very end of his comic. It's a weird story, but like, goddamn, like they go all out with everything. They make it so fun while it's being so weird. So, I mean, I love it. I'm gonna find out what the rest of it is and read it. Hope. Hope is a woman, a mother, a wife, a superhero. And Hope ends up having her daughter taken away. While they could have focused on the whole aspect of being a mother with a child and being a superhero, they chose to go with the repercussions of being a superhero and what effect that can have on the child. Child Services takes her daughter away, and from what I can see, this entire story is going to be about her trying to get her daughter back from Child Protective Services, which I think is a really cool idea. It's something that's not really touched on. Like, The Incredibles, yes, you have to deal with being a superhero that has a family, but in this one, it's being a superhero who has lost her family. And that is something I'm very excited to see the future for, because it's never been explored before. So, let's do it, guys. Alright, Lady Mechanica. Lady Mechanica is one of those that sends out the exact same issue every free comic book day that I've seen it. That's been a few years, like a couple of years in a row now. Lady Mechanica is a cyborg from the Victorian era that hunts down and tries to protect and preserve mythological creatures. And she always runs in with the law that ends up ruining that plan for her. She finds a poor creature that recognizes her from the days before it. And when she realizes that, she's like, I need to protect this thing at all costs. So when she tries to, it gets its head blown off by the local sheriff. And Lady Mechanica kind of loses her shit and beats the hell out of the sheriff. And then basically tells everyone else, like, if you want to stop me, please try. Please do it. I honestly love this story. She looks very much like a vampire, but is not at all a vampire. Like, this artwork is gorgeous. I'm very excited to look into this and learn more about Lady Mechanica. Next up, we have the Avengers plus the Savage Avengers. The Avengers always have fun, exciting adventures during Free Comic Book Day. This one is no different. We have Tony Stark, who is now dealing with being trapped in somewhere that he doesn't recognize. We have the Avengers all around the world fighting against Namor because he is trying to set up like a barrier around Atlantis. We just have a bunch of different Avengers teams at this point. Like, there are Avengers all over the globe. And Tony Stark is lost. Nobody knows where he is because it turns out he's not somewhere, he is somewhen. Tony finds himself face to face with the original Avengers from I want to say it's 1 million BC. So we've got Odin, we have the first Iron Fist, we have the first Starbrand, we have the first Ghost Rider, we have the first Sorcerer Supreme, also known as Agamotto. And goddamn, like, this is just beautiful. That's Tony Stark, and Tony Stark's just gonna be kind of stuck there. I'm excited to read more about that, guys. the Avengers 1 million BC always just, like when I first saw it last year, I got really excited. And then when I read about them in Marvel Legacy, it got even more so. Alright, a publishing company called Humanoids is working on building their own universe with the H1 Ignition. H1 Ignition includes stories by Mark Waid, John Cassidy, Carla Speed McNeil, and a laundry list of other writers. They're building a universe that is, to be honest, it looks like it's going to be like as competitive as Image was. There's a lot going, there's several different stories, each introducing new characters and the abilities that they have. There's a mind reader, there's a character that has to be close to his companion at all times, otherwise a massive explosion will happen. There's a group of characters that are just causing trouble because people are looking at them the wrong way. It's a lot to take in, but the fact that they're setting this up now and like letting us know that there's going to be a lot going on in the future is a beautiful thing, and I'm excited to see where it goes. If you've never thought to yourself you wanted to see Adam West's Batman meet Christian Bale's Batman, I don't want to be friends with you anymore, because that's exactly what Dragonfly meets Dragonfly Man is. So, this side of the coin, you've got the dark, gritty, like, just bad world. This side, you have Adam West. Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man are two very different characters that are very similar in where they come from and who they are. One is very much dealing with a corrupt politician and government system, while the other is dealing with petty crime, broken, jaywalking and robbing a bank, see? So they end up getting switched and going to each other's worlds, and that becomes a big issue because, well, they're not used to fighting crime the way the other one does. So I'm excited to read that. I actually have the first couple issues at my subscription box at my comic book shop, and I'm going to read the hell out of them. So if you haven't looked into it, I would recommend it. It's done by Ahoy Comics. A-H-O-Y Comics. Pokemon has been around since the 1990s. I believe the original games were released in 1994. Pokemon I Choose You was a movie that adapted the first season of Pokemon into one big movie. They changed a lot. Oh god, they changed so much. But it worked. It was a really great movie, and it ended with Pikachu and Ash going face to face with Ho-Oh. And when they did, Ho-Oh trashed Pikachu. And this is a great adaptation of it. Like, it's beautifully done. And it also has an inclusion of the first little bit of Pokemon Adventures. If you haven't read Pokemon Adventures, you should. If you think the games are great and you think the show is okay, you're going to love Pokemon Adventures, the manga. Oh, no. Next up we have Under the Moon, which is from that other DC imprint, DC Inc. DC Inc. is more of like middle grade, like 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade stuff. This comic is Selena Kyle's origin, her abusive stepfather, the death of her first pet cat, and, well, how she responds to it. In addition to that story, we've also got a preview of what's called Teen Titans Raven. And Raven, for those of you who don't know, is one of my favorite DC heroes ever. This is her just dealing with who she is. And so, like, why wouldn't you want to read that? Why wouldn't you want to learn more about what Raven thinks of herself? We've got The Dark Age. In the middle of the 21st century, there is a toxin that goes out that disintegrates metal, all forms of metal. Everything goes, except for wood and, a few other important things. So, we are now in a second dark age where the United States of America is no more. Canada, on the other hand, is thriving. There's a lot of not so great people doing not so great things, as with any post-apocalyptic world. And there's a follow-up story in here called Afterburn. There's apparently been some sort of similar mass extinction event, and the people that are left want certain things. Specifically, those Fabergé eggs, which I've never really understood the pull for, but to each their own. So, yeah, Fabergé eggs, $12 million for the Fabergé eggs. 12 eggs, $1 million each. Bunch of guys go to try and get them, and all of them break. Every last one of them breaks on the way back to deliver it to the buyer, which sucks because that's $12 million, y'all. I don't know if you've ever seen $12 million, but it's like, it's a lot more than a stack of hundreds, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, Dark Age and Afterburn, y'all. Red 5 Comics never ceases to amaze. Alright guys, final 4. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 35 years of the TMNT. This is a really good, like, gets you caught up on what has happened so far and what's coming next. In addition to that, it also gives you a breakdown of every single, like, story in the ongoing TMNT stories, from the first volume all the way up to the most recent volume, which I believe is volume 21. So, like, we've got a lot to catch up on with the TMNT, but luckily for us, we know how to do it. All right, Donnie Cates, a local Austinite, which is where I'm from, has been, I don't know how, but he is always just writing new stuff. He's working for Marvel now, he's working for Image, he's got Redneck going, he's got other stuff, and now he's going for Vault with Interceptor. Interceptor is a story about the New Earth, essentially. The New Earth is beautiful. It's very, very peaceful. And the president of Earth is told, hey, just so you know, vampires are alive on the old Earth, and we need to kill them all. And so the president's like, sweet, let's do it. So they send this single warrior to Earth to kind of try and clean things out. And when she lands, she realizes that there are still humans living on Earth, very secretly, very carefully. And vampires have evolved much beyond that mindless feeding thing that we initially thought they were. They are much more akin to, like, humans than one would think. All right. Punchline is an Antarctic press story about a superhero that's getting ready to retire, and she needs to find a replacement. So she finds a teenager and transfers her powers over to her, and is now in charge of getting her ready to fight and be a superhero. The writer for this, Mr. Williams, Bill Williams to be exact, was actually there, and I got him to autograph a cover of this, which is awesome because I love getting autographs by stuff. I loved the story. Like, I am genuinely excited to read the rest of this just because of how well written the character is. Like, this girl is a shy teenager, but she is so ready to be a superhero to prove that she's more than what she appears. And lastly, kicking off the big event of this year, in my opinion, Spider-Man. That's Carnage, y'all. Carnage is a fucking nightmare. If y'all never read any of the Carnage comics or any events involving Carnage, he is a nightmare. We've had Maximum Carnage, we've had Minimum Carnage, we've had Carnage, just all kinds of carnage. He took over an entire city in the middle of the US once. Now what we've got is a story called, oh god, what is it? Absolute Carnage. And this is going to be the cover of it. Now, Venom's story has been going and been written by Donnie Cates. Again, I bring up Donnie Cates again, local Austinite, who has been doing a phenomenal job from himself. So instead of this being about, just being Carnage, it is Carnage taking over the body of Eddie Brock, who is Venom. Which is a big deal, because that means that Venom is also going to be involved in this Absolute Carnage storyline, if not as like a backseat driver for Carnage. So, I'm excited for Absolute Carnage, guys. I am so excited to see what else is coming new, and guys, we're at the end. That's it. Those were the last 2 comics I had to talk about, and now we're done. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for your continuing support.